aligning with the contemplation of these deeper principles until these principles that we were getting tastes of become internalized. Just like in Aikido. You know, you think of Aikido mastery. What is Aikido mastery? Oh, there's so much, but it's when the external teachings and practices and techniques and schools and systems and culture, all that stuff becomes internalized to where it's a natural expression of who you are. Great, everybody. Welcome to this community call on Aikido and meditation. I'm Miles Kessler. I'm the director of the Integral Dojo. I am an Aikido teacher. I am also a meditation teacher. And the way that I personally came to meditation was that since a kid, I'd always wanted to do some martial. I was totally into the martial arts, but I was also totally into this kind of transformational, a little bit of a comic book kind of fantasy about martial arts and having some spiritual edge and transformational capacity. And I pursued a lot of martial arts, and I definitely got that from the martial arts. But when I found Aikido, that was the one for me, just because Sensei did have this deep spiritual source that was clearly the source of his Aikido. And I was just drawn. Plus, I love Aikido. And I practiced Aikido for probably about 5 years in the States, got my black belt. And then I just wanted to go, I'm from Texas originally. I wanted to go on to basically train in Japan. It's kind of a childhood fantasy dream of mine. So I ended up going there and found my way to Iwama, practiced with Saito Sensei. Super wonderful teacher, wonderful experience. I loved my whole 8 years of living in Japan, practicing Aikido. And year by year, it was hardcore training. I was training full time, and year by year, I was, getting better, faster, stronger. I was a young man, perfect time for me. And I was very much involved with the pursuit of, very much related to my age at the time, even though I did have some spiritual longing. I was very much involved with the technical side and, and really getting strong and good in that. And that's great. It's a wonderful thing to pursue. But at a certain point, I felt like my head was bumping up against a glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling was, the glass ceiling was very simple. Where's the spirit? Personally, I was feeling, well, where's the spiritual part of this? Even though it was, if any of you've ever practiced in Japan, there's already kind of a spiritual vibe there. And people can be competitive as hell in Japan as much as they can anywhere else, but you were already in this kind of cultural context, and and it was Iwama, and it was O-sensei's dojo, and the founder of the Aiki shrine, and you kind of felt the vibe. But at the same time, I was kind of thinking, okay, but if this is a spiritual practice, because I had an assumption that Aikido was not just a martial art, but it was also a spiritual practice. If this is a spiritual practice, how come I don't feel like I'm tapping into deep spiritual source? I was definitely like alive and on fire and super excited about the energy and that I was getting out of Aikido, the flow and there's just something fantastic about being at your kind of athletic edge. That's a very exciting thing, and I love that. But I couldn't help but feel like I was still kind of like Neo, Matrix 1 and Matrix 2. He kind of gets out of the Matrix in 1, then you realize he's still kind of in the Matrix. So I couldn't help realizing that, or bumping into this fact that every time I felt like there was a breakthrough, I was back into another Matrix. And it was clear to me that well, there just isn't any really, even though Aikido is a spiritual martial art, there's a spiritual philosophy to really, really, really do Aikido. You have to tap some spiritual depth, not to do Aikido, excuse me, to tap into the principles of Aikido. You have to find some transpersonal space. Miles, the ego part of me, it's antithesis of the principles. Principles are universal. Miles, the ego part of me, is relative. And whenever I wasn't feeling like I was getting it, it wasn't a problem with the principles. It was a problem with the relative part of myself. So my pursuit in Aikido went from being physical, technical to being more spiritual. And I started to realize, well, I'm just not getting it as much as I was seeking. And at the same time, I had kind of, at the end of 8 years, I'd kind of come to my belly was full. You know, what I went to Japan for, I kind of got it. And my belly was full. Not that I mastered or anything like that, but I realized, no, if I leave Japan today, around 8 years, I realized, okay, there's a point where I leave Japan, my practice is just going to continue to grow. It was just so clear. Before that point, I felt like if I leave Japan, my practice is going to go down. Now, of course, that has nothing to do with Japan. It has to do with the intensity and the quality of the dojo that I was training in. But I stayed there and I was able to teach English and teach very few hours a week and then do Aikido full time. So that was becoming fulfilled, but I was not fulfilled spiritually. So I was like, well, before I go home, before I go back to the States, I'm going to go on a little travel around the world, visit some meditation teachers, do a little meditation practice, become enlightened, and go open a dojo. You know, as easy as that. Of course, it was not that easy, but I did pursue, and I won't go into the whole story, but I ended up finding my way to Burma, practicing meditation in the Burmese Mahasi tradition with another teacher named Sayadaw Pandita. And I just went, for a 1 month retreat, and I realized I just wanted to do more. And that ended up being 8 years. I didn't stay on retreat for 8 years, but 8 years, every winter for 8 years, I was going back to Burma and going on retreat from 2 months to sometimes 10 months. 1 year I did 10 months, 1 year I did 2 months. It was usually around 3 months. And then in between that, to earn money to kind of be able to do that lifestyle. I mean, I had no responsibilities. I had no family. I had no relationship. I had no career that was waiting for me. I had no dependents. I had no obligations. I was free. So I would tour around teaching Aikido in Europe and the States, and then I would save my money and I'd go back on retreat. So it was through when I finally entered into a Buddhist meditative tradition, and I'm not saying that it has to be Buddhist, but when I realized, when I entered into that tradition, it's a 2,500-year-old lineage of practice. Aikido is like 75 years now, something like that, whatever. Anyways, as I entered that lineage, I realized, okay, now I know why I wasn't feeling it in Aikido, just because this lineage is so deep and so long, it was so rich. And the spiritual practice was clear cut. It was just clear cut what I was meant to do, what anybody who goes and meditate meant to do. And so I pursued that. And for a while, for a few years there, I had my Aikido line of development and I had my meditation line of development, and they weren't so much crossing. But then the integration, gradually over time began to happen more and more and more and more and more. And I'm not saying that the limitation that I was feeling in Aikido was a shortcoming. Not at all. It's not a shortcoming of the art. It's not a shortcoming of the art. Aikido is Aikido. The school I was at is the school I was at. Another school will have slightly different methodologies. Different teachers will have different ways of presenting. Some teachers are more physical. Some teachers are more technical. Some teachers are more philosophical. Some teachers are more relational, conflict resolution. Other teachers are more about leadership, more, some teachers are very much about Japanese culture. Some teachers are post-Japanese culture. It's just, these are all good contexts to train in. All that matters, as far as I'm concerned, at this point in my life, is, are you organizing yourself around the principles of Aikido? And is everything that you're doing eventually, sooner or later, become an expression of that? That's very spiritual. That's actually a very spiritual thing. And the principles of Aikido are that. And it turns out that the principles of meditation are also about that. And it was nice for me to practice in a Burmese Buddhist tradition where all those principles, the whole practice was really around the discovery, or not discovery, the awakening of, aligning with the contemplation of these deeper principles, until these principles that we were getting tastes of become internalized. Just like in Aikido. You think of Aikido mastery. What is Aikido mastery? Oh, there's so much, but it's when the external teachings and practices and techniques and schools and systems and culture, all that stuff becomes internalized to where it's a natural expression of who you are. That takes time. For some people more, for some people less, but it takes time. And it doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't, the principles of Aikido or enlightenment in meditation, it does not drop from the sky and land on our head. It doesn't work that way. We have a lot of hard work to do to get there. The principles themselves are kind of effortless. You know, they're a beautiful expression of laws of the universe. In that sense, they're kind of effortless. But just because we're human beings, egoic beings, we have a lot of perception that needs to be cleansed. Excuse me. A lot of misunderstandings of how we relate to the world. And that takes some effort to work through that. And, you know, God bless us all, but it's a very, very worthy path of practice. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. I'm going to put you guys in a breakout room and actually let you do a little bit of discussion, because today's community call is not not meant to be a lecture. It's actually meant to be a practice. It's meant to be a practice. So what I want to do is we start with this path of practice, this path of whether you're doing meditation or whether you're doing Aikido or whether you're doing both in some form or another. They are both higher paths to practice. They're both higher paths to practice. So what does that mean, a higher path of practice? It means that they're not ordinary paths. In an ordinary path, I can take my kind of ordinary egoic Miles, and I might be a nice guy, I might be a schmuck, I might be a jerk, I might be a dick, I might be whatever. On an ordinary path, I can develop along that path, but those aspects of me, they just go along right with me all the way. I can become very, 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 very good. Think of martial arts where, you know, personal development is not really the thing, but kind of a power path. You can become very powerful, but you can still be a jerk. Darth Vader path. You make that Darth Vader move. There's no purification of the self. There's no purification of the ego. There's no clarification of the ego. We don't make that journey from egoic sense of self towards spirit. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying anything's wrong with the ego. It's totally cool. It's when we're completely identified with the ego. We have no access to transpersonal identity. When we're completely identified as the ego, it tends to be problematic in one way or another for us or for other people, more or less. So when I say a higher path of practice, it's the one that's moving you from the self, sense of self, that small sense of self, personal sense of self, egoic sense of self, towards spirit. And a higher path of practice, every step of the way on a higher path of practice is a step of awareness, a step of mindfulness, a step of focus, a step of being present in the present moment. That's why it's a higher path. And sooner or later, usually sooner, that higher path is going to lead you to the limitations of yourself. Boom, from the comfort zone to the uncomfortable edge of development. If you're there, it's uncomfortable. Maybe everything inside of you is saying go back, but if you're there, you know it's a higher path of practice. It's personal development, or I would even say psycho-spiritual development. So what is your path of practice? What is your path of practice? And what is your relationship to the principles of Aikido? And what is your relationship to meditation? Very simple. I'm going to put you in groups of 3 so you can kind of meet other people here. Give me one moment to rooms. Good. Yeah, very simple. 5 minutes. Just say hi, who you are, where you're from. And say, yeah, I practice Aikido. I do also meditation. If you do meditation, what's your personal relationship to a higher path of practice? Could be Aikido, could be meditation. All right. And we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. Enjoy the breakout. Great, everybody. Welcome back from the breakout. How was the breakout? How was your little meeting people from all over the world? USA, Ontario, Canada, Croatia, Netherlands.
Too short, too short. It was too short.
Too short. From Ireland, Fiona's joining us. Hey, Fiona. I'll give you another chance to do a breakout, okay? A little bit later. I just want to kind of get into the meat of the program today. You know, like I said, we're doing, I'm going to do about, I guess with this one, total of 5 of these. So September, October, November, and December, we'll be doing another one. And we're going to take a different aspect of Aikido and meditation, or at least as I kind of as I kind of organize these two things. We're going to be taking a different aspect each day, and these different aspects happen to be authentic spiritual perspectives. And Japanese culture and Japanese culture is heavily infused with Shinto. It's also heavily infused with Zen. Obviously, so O Sensei, for those of you who know O Sensei's history, he was a Shinto man. He was a lot more than just Shinto. I mean, there was some Shingon Buddhism, but he was more Shinto. He was Omotokyo, which is pretty far out, esoteric, shamanic, pantheistic path. And a lot of his meditation was connected to that. That's not my background, although, O Sensei is the source as far as I'm concerned. But also in Japanese culture, you'll find a lot of Zen influence. And it turns out that, these Zen non-dual states of mind are powerful pointing out instructions for our practice with Aikido and meditation. And when it comes to practice, there's a lot of nuts and bolts. It's just like Aikido. There's a lot of things you can learn, and it can take some time and develop it. But it's also nice to just have some pointing outs. The old metaphor of the finger pointing to the moon. The finger is not the issue. My style of Aikido, or my teacher of Aikido, or my culture, or this culture, or that culture. That's all interesting stuff. Fingers are good. Fingers, look, finger. It's very good, very good. You can spend a lifetime going around fingers, but the finger's pointing at something that is beyond the finger. And why is the finger pointing at something beyond the fingers? Because that's something that the finger is pointing to we don't get. Our cognitive, our rational, our logical minds it cannot capture it, because our logical, rational, linear minds is exactly what prevents us from being in alignment with these spiritual dimensions. And these Japanese Zen mind states, let's say, are beautiful. Actually, they're an expression of the infinite. They're an expression of awakened mind. And things like Zanshin, sustained mind, Mushin, no mind, Fudoshin, unshakable mind, Daishin, big mind, Daishin, big heart. These types of mental, let's just say these Zen terms are the finger that points to the moon. And the whole point is the moon. It's not the finger. Fingers are good, don't get me wrong, but let's not get stuck on the finger. So Zanshin. So today we're going to kind of focus on Zanshin. Next one will be Mushin or Fudoshin or Daishin. We'll kind of move through these things, but and I'll translate all those later. But today we're going to focus on Zanshin. Now, if you're practicing Aikido, you may have heard this term. Yeah, it's a good chance you've heard this term. If you're practicing Aikido weapons, there's a better chance that you've heard this term, because it is used a little bit more with weapons, with Boken or with Jo. But this term Zanshin means, the direct translation of Zanshin is a remaining mind, or you could say remaining consciousness, you could say remaining awareness. Zan, this Japanese word zan, is nokoru. It's leftover. It's what's remaining afterwards. Now, that's a little bit of a confusing translation, because it's not about what's after Zanshin. A better translation, or something that's a little bit more functional for us, would be a sustained mind, or a continuous mind, or continuous consciousness, continuous awareness, continuous presence. Zanshin is a state of continuous presence. And even though in some Aikido techniques, weapons, or sometimes empty hand technique, they'll say Zanshin, hold that position, really focus, Zanshin. Think of a cut. Cut, and you just hold that for a few seconds, like those wonderful Japanese samurai movies where it's like it takes them 10 minutes to kind of, like gunfighters to get together, and there's a quick flurry and blood, and you don't know what happened. And after like 3 or 4 seconds, one of them kind of slides off, falls it, and breaks it into cut in half or 2 pieces. So that kind of moment where you're waiting what happened, that's Zanshin, but it also is there before. Zanshin. It's also there during. It's also there after. And what is so beautiful about practicing Zanshin is that when we start to practice Zanshin, we actually start to align with the reality of the moment. It is a fact. This is a fact that development, human development, developing as a human being, developing spiritually, developing emotionally, developing mentally, developing relationally, all these great dimensions that we develop and grow in. It is a fact that development only happens. We only develop in the present moment. Children are growing all the time, whether they're mindful or present or not, they're growing and they're developing, sure. As adults, growing, developing our mind, developing our heart, developing our spirit only happens in the present moment. So the key is to be in the present moment, but the mind's tendency is not to stay in the present moment. The mind's tendency is to be in the future and the past, or to be fixated. Whereas Zanshin is an open state and is infinitely in the present moment. Even if I'm like in Patagonia, or I'm thinking about the future, or I'm ruminating on something that happened in the past, and I'm angry about this or happy about that or fixated on that, Zanshin is always here. I'm just not aligned with it. But Zanshin is a wonderful pointing out practice that drops us right into the present moment. I say that one of the things that I like to say is that Zanshin is the mindfulness of Aikido. At least that's kind of the way that I learned it. It was a lot of focus about Zanshin, continued awareness. And that was kind of one of my pointing out instructions, to just get me to wake up and be present in the present moment. So Zanshin is a state of full awareness with the continuity of experience. And it is very similar to the ringing of a bell. I don't have a bell with me. Bells in the dojo. By the way, we had a great Shodan test here tonight. And I think there's still a few people out there kind of celebrating. So I don't want to go out there and get the bell, but imagine a bell. Imagine ringing a bell, if it was a bell. When you hit the bell, there's a beep. And if you really listen carefully, sometimes I do this with my kids, and kids have ADHD are pretty much kind of built in. So to get them to focus is not always that easy. So we play a game. We do the bell and say, who's the last one that can hear the bell? And they listen. And it totally brings them together, because they're listening until the bell totally disappears. That continued awareness, if you really try to hear that last, sound molecule, whatever it is, before it disappears, that's Zanshin. And if you're able to do that, then Zanshin, when it disappears, because you followed that last sound molecule till it disappears, that means that you will be completely present for the next arising, for whatever the next experience is, that you're there with that experience from the beginning. So only when we can follow things to the end are we there from the beginning. There's a beautiful poem from Matsuo Basho. Basho is a Japanese poet. He was the father or the creator of the haiku. And, a lot of wonderful poems, the frog jumping in the pond and stuff like that. So he wrote a book called The Old Road to the North, where he basically went on a pilgrimage through all the temples and monasteries in the north of Japan. And, he wrote a lot of haiku in the way. And he was sitting one day in a monastery listening, just hanging out in nature. Japanese monasteries up in the mountains are really, really, even to this day, they're super beautiful, super spiritual. They have these big iron bells. And he was, somebody was ringing the bell, and something happened to him. He shifted. And he sat down and he wrote this poem, this haiku. He says, "The temple bell stops, but I still hear the sound coming out of the flowers. The temple bell stops, but I still hear the sound coming out of the flowers." So there's that fullness of the moment, and a bell is kind of, first they're just beautiful to be vibed by a bell, but it also brings us into the fullness of the moment. Bells are wonderful for that. And then the fullness of the moment, when the bell disappears, the fullness of the moment is coming out of the flowers. It's coming out of the walls. It's coming out of the French horn. If you play the French horn, it's coming out of the cup of coffee. It's coming out of the children playing on the side. It's coming out of the dog barking. It's just there. And that's when Zanshin, as a practice that we're actually doing, that we're actively doing, becomes an expression of an inner state. It's an inner state. The shift happens. From the finger, the moon kind of appears. And even though the bell inevitably fades away, because all things are impermanent, attention, the intensity of the intention remains. And that's the whole point with Zanshin. So I'm going to give you one more poem here. All these years of doing Aikido and meditation, I used to collect these poems. And there was a Chinese Zen master named Li Po. Highly recommend, if you want to go look for Li Po, look for his poems. They're so beautiful. He was similar to Basho. He had this kind of a moment where he just, was in total Zanshin and was fully awoke, and he sat down and he wrote a poem, not a koan, but nonetheless touching and beautiful. Li Po. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last cloud drains away. We are sitting together, the mountain and I, until only the mountain remains. The birds have vanished. The birds have vanished down the sky. Now the last clouds drain away. We sit together, the mountain and I, until only the mountain remains. Some of the best art, poetry, or music for that matter, or martial arts, when we're really transported, touched, moved by these things, where the artist is in some transported state when he creates the art or she creates the art. And then when we take part in that, it could be 100, 300 years later, we're transported to that same state. So that's the power of Zanshin, that it actually has this kind of transformational power to it. So since Fiona said it was too short, I'm going to put you guys back in groups, and I'll make new groups this time. I'm blaming you, Fiona. What is your experience of Zanshin? Yeah. What is, it's a good chance that your Aikido style has talked about it some, so you probably heard about it. You've applied it, practiced in some ways, or maybe you get it from another, maybe even get it outside of Aikido, whatever. Or maybe this is a completely new concept for you. All good. We're going to drop into another conversation and organize around the state of Zanshin. So I'm going to put these in groups of 3. Just a moment. There we go. So we have 3 people in each room. I reorganized them. If you find yourself for some reason alone, be patient. I'll reorganize the rooms. And what's the time now? Yeah. Okay. I'll give you 8 minutes for this one. No, okay. 10 minutes. I guess it's better to do 10 minutes. Yeah. You have 10 minutes. I don't want Fiona. Okay. All right. So we'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Enjoy the conversation. So welcome back, everybody. Fiona, were you satisfied? Was that enough? I mean, of course. Yeah, I was just talking with Richard. Richard Moon Sensei is on the call, by the way. He's a dear friend, and when we talk, we basically we do jiwaza, either physically or verbally, and it's never enough time. But at the same time, it's always, it always is. We have 10 minutes left. If some people needs to leave on time, we will finish. I'll try to finish on time. But if there's any questions or anything that people really want to clear up afterwards, then I'll stick around for that. But and I do need to make a couple announcements here at the end. Would anybody like to share what come up? We can take 1 or 2 people. something that came up for you in the group? I mean, there's so much to say about, if there is, raise your hand physically or electronically. There's so much more to say about Zanshin. I mean, Zanshin in the Buddhist tradition is really, really clearly laid out. They don't call it Zanshin. They have all these different terms for it, like Vitaka Vichara, the initial application of the mind, the sustained application of the mind. We could look at Zanshin as a natural state. We can look at it as an anchor in the present moment. We could look at just simply observing the breath and staying with the breath from the beginning of the in-breath through the middle of the in-breath, all the way to the end of the in-breath. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, Volker said he couldn't hear me. All the way to the end of the in-breath until the breath, that last molecule of breath is done. And then you're there in a pause. And the pause has a beginning and it has a middle. It's a duration. It's pretty short, but it's a duration. Then it ends. And then the out-breath begins. And you're right there with the beginning of the out-breath, all the way through with all those kind of interesting phenomena and characteristics that are happening in the out-breath, all the way to the very, 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 very last bit of breath is out. And you're right there for the pause. The beginning of the pause, the middle of the pause, the end of the pause, and etc. Yeah, Fiona, please. You're muted, Fiona.
There we go. Yeah, you won't shut me up now. No, I just, as you were talking there about the in-breath and the out-breath and so on, it's like the seasons, it's like the cycles, it's like, it's not actually a circle, it's a spiral. So each in-breath is different, each out-breath is different, and it's a spiraling process, and the learning process as well. I've always noticed that with Aikido. You learn all the techniques, then you have to relearn all the techniques because you're not the same person anymore. You've become a new person. Through learning the techniques, you've become something different. Then you relearn them and you relearn. And so spiraling, like the seasons, like a tree grows with the extra rings every year and whatever. So rather than a straight line forward, it's very much a spiral. Even the breath is a spiral.
There's a great quote I love, maybe by Tennyson. I don't really remember who it is, but it's you go. I wish maybe I'll find it in a minute, but you go on your journey. You will not stop our exploring until we've come to the end, and then when we come to the end, we realize that we realize that we're back at the beginning, but we know it for the first time, as if for the first time. And every technique is like that, especially since Aikido is some method. The traditional methodology of Aikido, not all schools do this, but the traditional methodology of Aikido is repetitive training. Repeat, polish, refine. And as long as you're putting awareness in there, it's infinite what we learn. It's infinite. Same wrist, same body, same center, same mechanics, same principles, but oh my God, so much more. Yeah, spiral, beautiful. We come back around, but it's at another level. Yep. And Zanshin is there the whole time. Would somebody else like to share something that came up for you in the group, in your group discussion? Was there anything interesting that came up? Yes, Mr. Miranda. Hey, Matthew.
Can you hear me?
I can, loud and clear, brother.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, because in the groups, I met some people that they made expressions. They love Aikido, and one person was talking about their old sensei, but these individuals have not found themselves able to get back to the dojo for some reason or another.
Because of since COVID, you mean?
Well, this particular one, this person may have been out of, they say things like, I've been out of Aikido for so many years. I've been meaning to get back. And, and this outreach that you're doing, Miles, these meetings that you're having, it's like the dojo. And these people are benefiting like in class. So I just wanted to see, that's what I saw today. Individuals saying that they're struggling to make it back to Aikido. But here is Aikido reaching out and looking for them through you, Kessler Sensei. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Yeah. I guess we all have to, like Piano was saying, there's seasons. There is seasons to our training, and yeah. But the beautiful thing about Aikido is that the principles, all times, all places, all circumstances, Kotegaeshi, okay, at least I need another person, and they have to have at least one hand for me to do Kotegaeshi. And, it'd be nice if we can go to the dojo and put on our gi, and, and they have to agree that we take turns attacking. And so that I can practice Aikido. And then I go on my daily life, and I never once did Kotegaeshi in my whole life. I'm still waiting for somebody to kind of, no, actually I'm not, but that's fine. That's cool. However, when you go to the dojo, you practice center. You go to the dojo, you practice connection. You go to the dojo, you practice Zanshin. You can take these and practice them at all times, in all places, in all circumstances, every moment of every day, of every week, of every year, your whole life. This is where the value of the training is at. Not just Aikido, the same thing in meditation. It's exactly the same in meditation. There are two different practices, but they do organize around the same principles. So we have about 5 minutes left. Yeah, Matthew, you want to say something else?
Yeah, one thing quick, the Kotegaeshi. I looked at things from your point of view, and then I showed you the reality of it. On a daily basis, we do that to people. You gotta Irimi Tenkan, with them for a little while. And then little by little, you pull them in your way. And then at the end, you get to Kotegaeshi, you get to display exactly what your initial intention was. But you got to go for that Tenkan ride with them. Be empathetic. Be empathetic, even if you know the truth and the person doesn't know. Go for that ride with them. And then roll it out. Don't roll it out right off the bat. Don't atemi. There's no atemi in Aikido. Arigashimasu.
I miss you, Matthew.
I miss you too.
Empathy for a second, because empathy is really the feeling into your partner and getting them one way or another, and to be able to do that, and it's Zanshin. Again, if we just kind of bring everything back to what we're organizing around today, this idea of Zanshin. And I would encourage you, even though we're coming to the end, I got a couple of announcements I want to make. After the announcements, we'll kind of officially close, but I'll stick around if anybody wants to talk or ask questions. But what was I going to say? Yeah. Relational Zanshin. Relational Zanshin is a powerful, powerful practice. As a teacher, I do it I use it all the time. I'm also kind of a coach and a meditation teacher. I'm using it all the time. And then my personal relationships, I got 2 little kids as well. I sometimes I don't do it with them, but when I don't do it with them, they get the feedback right away. So they bring me back in. So yeah. So anyways, we're going to wrap this up. So everything that came up for you today, everything that you heard, if you heard something that clicked for you, or if, inspired you in some way, or somebody said something that showed you another layer of this, then take a moment with Zanshin, take a moment and kind of reflect on that for a moment right now, and savor it. What does it feel like in the body? What does it feel like energetically? What does it feel like in the mind? What is that experience when we shift out of this constant doing in the mind? Which is not a bad thing. We have to do that in our life, but then we want to be able to kind of come back in the present moment. Zanshin keeps us anchored in this present moment, this moment, and this moment, like a chain of moments that is unbroken. What does that feel like? What does it mean to apply that? What does it mean when it's sustained? What does it mean when we go from the finger that's pointing at the moon, where we actually kind of, the moon comes into view? And then, I would encourage you to apply that, going forward. This community call on Aikido meditation was about Zanshin. As I said before, I'm going to do a few more of these. There'll be one in September, one in October, one in November, one in December. I put these together because of a special event that I'm going to be teaching in January in the Netherlands on Aikido and meditation. In that retreat, it's a 3-day retreat. In that retreat, we will be focusing on Zanshin at least one of the days, if not the very beginning half of the day. And before I go forward about that, I do want to tell you that I have a little gift for everybody here. I've got this is from my meditation for Aikidoka course that some of you here have done, actually. It's basically a guided meditation. So if you look in the chat box right now, I'm going to send you guys a link. There it is. Direct message. Oh, no, sorry, that was, there we go. This one should work. Okay, good. So that's a link to a guided meditation. I think it's like a 20, 30-minute guided meditation on Zanshin. We're actually kind of walk you through. I think there's a teaching there at the beginning, a little video, and then a recorded guided meditation. So definitely go check that out and apply it. And some people actually enjoy guided meditations. For other people, it's not really important. So feel free to use that as you like. Let me just share my screen for a moment, everybody, so you can see. Yeah, you guys see this Zanshin, sustained mindfulness meditation for Aikido. So this is what I just sent you. Now, as I said before, in January 13th, 14th, and 15th in the Netherlands, I'm going to be teaching a special retreat called the Aikido Meditation Retreat. And it's going to be 3 days of us getting together. We'll start Friday afternoon, Friday evening, and go all the way to Sunday late afternoon. And we're going to go deep into these things, little by little. We're going to spend half a day on Zanshin, half a day on Mushin, half a day on Fudoshin. Mushin is no mind, Fudoshin is unshakable mind, and half a day on Daishin, which is big mind, big heart. It's in this beautiful location in the countryside with this Dutch name right here, Moreveen. Roni's going to say something about it in a minute. We'll have one of these rooms and vegetarian meals. And that's the kitchen. We don't need that. That's the outside, although it's probably going to be January. Hang on. There's a good dojo. Those are the rooms there. And there's a good dojo space. There it is. That's the dojo space that we're going to be in right there. So we're going to spend a day on Zanshin, day on Mushin, a day on Daishin. Oh, and Takemushu Aiki, of course, going into that. So those are the dates on January 13th, 14th, and 15th. Ronnie, did you want to, Ronnie's the organizer. Ronnie, can you jump in?
Actually, Marike will do some announcements. She's also the organizer.
Hey, Marike.
Hello. So we found this beautiful place in the north of the Netherlands. We organize the retreat on 13, 14, 15 of January. That's actually the second weekend of the next year. I think Miles already told almost everything. Maybe we can say something about the price, Miles, the price?
Sure.
So it's gonna be 450 euros, but that's all in. So that's the whole seminar, the sleeping, food. It's an all-in experience. And at the moment we have a super early bird price. So if you make a quick decision, it's gonna be 100 euros off, I think.
Yeah,
correct.
That's right.
So that's about it. I think we have I think it's a beautiful opportunity to have the combination of Aikido and meditation in a retreat kind of experience. We stay together with the group the whole weekend, so we can go more deeply into this material, and I think it's going to be very special. So we look forward.
Yeah, me too. And part of this retreat will be silent, but it won't be the whole retreat. So we'll spend maybe an hour or two a day in silence, but there's also going to be intentional dyads and training and then, meditation practice as well. So if anybody's interested in that, please come and join us. All right. Anybody else? Something to share or question? Yes, Herman.
Yes, thank you. Maybe it's a stupid question, but in January, is it the plan to also, how do you say, practice physical Aikido also?
Oh, yeah. It's going to be 50-50. Okay. Well, I take that back. We will meditate. I mean, I still have to design the kind of day-to-day schedule, but what I'm thinking is there'll be about actually sitting in silence, maybe a couple of hours a day. There'll be a lot of kind of meditative Aikido exercises, plus spiritual inquiry. So it's going to be an Aikido seminar, but it's an Aikido, meditation retreat. So we're not going to be rolling around for hours and hours and hours, but it'll be in one way. When I say rolling around for hours and hours and hours, I mean that physical intensity. But it will be equally as intensive, maybe even more intensive, because, you know, working with the mind can be intense.
Okay, but maybe a little bit rolling is
no, a lot of rolling
for physical practice. Oh, a lot of rolling.
Sure. No, totally. Yeah. Again,
okay, perfect.
The actual schedule. Marike wanted me to design the schedule already. I haven't designed the schedule yet. We've spoke about it, but we'll be in Gie's training. Yeah, for
okay. Well, I'm going to try to be there. I've been following you for some time now, and I think it will be very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, you're very welcome. It'd be great to have you with us. Fantastic. So with that, I hope that this little community call on Zanshin contributes to your practice, your awakening, your awakening to the principles of Aikido, your expression of the principles of Aikido, your awakening to meditative states, depths, and expressing that in the world. And may that lead you forward, forever and always forward on your path of practice. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Miles.
All right. Thanks, Ronnie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye.